It's January 9th, 2025. And we are looking at all the regulations that came out on January 8th. We have got quite a variety today, from financial penalties all the way to endangered species.
Sounds like a good time.
Yeah, it should be interesting. So first up, we've got the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They're adjusting their civil penalties due to inflation.
Right.
You know, kind of like how the dollar menu doesn't feel quite so dollar anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And it's actually required by the Federal Civil Penalties Inflation Adjustment Act of 1990. So this is something that has to happen. And essentially, it ensures that those penalties have the same bite even as the value of a dollar changes.
Makes sense.
And this isn't just some proposal. This is a final rule that goes into effect on January 15th, 2025.
So less than a week from now. Companies need to be aware that messing around could cost them more.
That's right.
Okay. Next, we've got the Consumer Product Safety Commission, the CPSC, teaming up with U.S. Customs and Border Protection to revamp their rules for certificates of compliance.
Right. So think of this as a streamlining of how companies prove their products meet safety standards. So imagine going from a paper-based system to a fully digital one.
Oh, wow.
This final rule covers everything from aligning rules for testing and certification to implementing electronic filing for imported products. But there's a bit of a lead time before this goes live.
Okay.
We're looking at July 8th, 2026.
Over a year away. That's interesting. Maybe they want to give businesses plenty of time to prepare for the switch to electronic filing.
That's possible, yeah.
Okay, now shifting gears to something a bit more serious. We have the Department of Justice, or DOJ. They're rolling out a final rule to implement Executive Order 1417. Focus on protecting sensitive personal data belonging to Americans.
This is all about preventing certain countries or people from accessing information that could be used for nefarious purposes.
Yeah.
We're talking about things like your social security number, your financial records, even your location data.
Wow.
And this rule is going into effect pretty quickly on April 8th, 2025.
So just a few months from now. Seems like they're not wasting any time with this one.
Yes, they're not.
Okay, now for something a little different, we have the Department of State, or DOS, actually withdrawing 2 proposed rules.
That's right. These rules would have added specific terms to contracts and grants to prevent discriminatory use of foreign assistance funds. But since they were just proposals and are now withdrawn, there's no actual change to current regulations.
Okay, so no news is news in this case.
I guess you could say that.
All right, let's move on to the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA. It looks like they have a couple of items on the docket today.
Yes, they do. First up, they've decided to defer sanctions on Alaska's Fairbanks North Star Borough.
What's the reason for that? Did they suddenly decide Fairbanks is a pristine paradise?
Not quite. It's because Alaska updated their implementation plan to meet the Clean Air Act requirements. Regarding particulate matter pollution, this is actually an interim final determination, meaning it's effective immediately, but could be subject to further changes.
Interesting. So they're giving Alaska the benefit of the doubt for now, but they're keeping an eye on things.
That's right.
What's the second EPA item?
Well, like the CFPB, the EPA is also adjusting its civil penalties due to inflation, as required by the Federal Civil Penalties Inflation Adjustment Act of 1990. And this final rule also takes effect immediately.
So double whammy for polluters. They have to clean up their act, and now it'll cost them more if they don't.
That's right.
Now let's fly over to the Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, where they're giving drone operators something to buzz about.
They are indeed. The FCC is issuing a new rule that gives operators of Uncrewed Aircraft Systems, or UAS, dedicated access to certain radio spectrum frequencies for control and communication.
So basically, they're making sure drones have their own airwaves to fly on, so to speak.
Exactly. That makes sense with the growing popularity of drones. For everything from package delivery to aerial photography.
Exactly.
This final rule enables non-networked operation of UAS, meaning they can operate independently without relying on a central network.
Oh, interesting.
And this comes into play pretty quickly on February 7th, 2025.
Less than a month away. I wonder how this will impact the development of drone technology in the coming years. It seems like we're just scratching the surface of what drones can do.
I agree. It's a rapidly evolving field with huge potential.
Okay, now let's shift gears from the sky to the ground and talk about the Federal Transit Administration, or FTA. They're proposing some changes to rules around how recipients of federal funding can provide charter services.
So this is affecting those buses you might see, shuttling people around for special events or tours.
Precisely.
The goal of these changes is to remove outdated information and streamline the regulations, making them easier to understand and follow.
That makes sense.
But keep in mind, this is just a proposed rule at this stage, so it's not in effect yet, and could change based on public feedback.
Makes sense. It's good that they're getting input before making any final decisions.
Right.
Now let's venture into the wild, the Fish and Wildlife Service, or FWS. It seems they've had a busy day dealing with petitions and proposed listings for endangered species.
They have indeed. First up, let's talk about the gray wolf. 2 petitions were filed seeking to change the listing status of gray wolves in different regions, but the FWS found that the evidence presented wasn't sufficient to warrant any changes.
So no immediate change to the gray wolf's current protections.
That's right. This was just a 90-day finding on the petitions. So for now, the status quo remains.
Okay, so the wolves can breathe a sigh of relief, at least for now.
Yeah.
What else is the FWS up to?
Well, they're also proposing to list a different species as endangered, the bleached sandhill skipper.
A skipper. I have to admit, I had to look that one up. It doesn't sound as majestic as a wolf. Why is the FWS so concerned about this little insect?
Well, it's an insect subspecies found only in Humboldt County, Nevada. And the proposal suggests that its population is facing significant threats.
Okay.
But again, this is just a proposed rule, meaning there's a period for public comment, and the final decision could be different.
It's fascinating to see how the Endangered Species Act is applied to such a diverse range of creatures, from wolves to tiny skippers.
It is.
And speaking of diverse, our last stop today is the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, or PBGC. They're also making adjustments due to inflation.
Yes, just like the CFPB and EPA. The PBGC is adjusting its maximum civil penalties, particularly focusing on those related to failing to provide required notices about pension plans. And this final rule is effective immediately, as of January 8th, 2025.
So it seems like keeping up with inflation is a recurring theme in today's regulatory landscape.
It is.
And that makes sense. Penalties need to be meaningful to ensure compliance.
Absolutely. Adjusting for inflation helps maintain the effectiveness of those penalties over time. It's like making sure the stick is still big enough to discourage bad behavior.
Visit www.topiclake.com to stay up to date.